So we'll start with you, if you don't mind. I warned you in advance. You can have a mic, and you have the joy of being with kids of Francisco generation daily, and you're already, fostering their agency, a word that is not very common in France, as we discussed, their ability to become author and actor of their own future. So can you tell us about the way it happens in your school and the way you resonate with what you've just heard?
Yes, so I work in a school where we actually try to do what Francisco just told us, which is to assess a global issue in a local way. And so at the school, what we are trying to do is not only just teach the children, but actually do it with them. If you just talk about global issues and about climate change, but don't do anything about it, then it just won't work. So that's what we try to do at the school. And we also try to help them to actually take charge of it. So they really participate in the school life. For instance, I don't know, that there is one children responsible for the waste management and everything like this. So they are really actors in this. And yeah, they can also have their own ideas, bring it to the table. And yeah, we really work together with them and not just in a hierarchical way. And yeah, I think that would be the main points.
Thank you, Maïlys. Lennart, you may want to bounce back because you are helping not only Maïlys, but a huge network of teachers that care for the planet and want to make a difference.
Yeah, thank you so much. Do I turn this on? First of all, I want to say my highest respect to Francisco and thank him for sharing his optimism and his passion with all of us. And I also want to say that we need quality climate education so that in tomorrow's world, youth like Francisco can live in, thrive in fundamentally transformed societies. That's the whole point of climate education. And I think what Maïlys just shared and her work as a teacher is really a great illustration of that climate education that we need in schools all over the world. So my name is Lennart Kuntze. I work for Teach for All as the Global Head of Climate Education and Leadership. And I would love to just understand what the audience knows. Could I get a quick show of hands of who has ever heard of Teach for All? Great. Who's ever heard of Les Choix d'École in France? Okay, it's great to see. So Teach for All, we are a global network of 60 independent national organizations that all do the same thing. They all recruit young professionals and graduates to train them and then send them to spend 2 years of teaching in their own nation's most underprivileged communities. And then with this foundation, many of the so-called fellows, after the 2 years, go on to spend their whole lifetime working towards educational equity. And they do that like Maïlys as teachers, or they do that through innovation or through school leadership or through educational policy. And of course, climate education is a huge part of that. So my very fortunate role is that I work with a network of right now 13,000 educators over the world and about 90,000 alumni from the 60 countries all over the world to try to equip them with what it takes to teach about climate change in their own schools and classrooms. I want to say a few quick things to just get everybody on the same page of why are we talking about climate education? Why do we need to talk about it? There's a story in 6 parts, and it's a bit of a tragedy. The first part is climate change is already the lived reality of children all over the world. There's over 1 billion children all over the world that live in extreme danger of the effects of climate change. The second is that this is having devastating effects on children's future, and it's having devastating effects on their current education. Only in 2020, there was 37 million children that couldn't enjoy an education because of the impacts of climate change. Climate change is the highest driver of forced migration these days. The third thing is kids know that. We talked about this. We heard Francisco speak about it. Children understand this very well, and they want things to happen. Climate change is the top priority on their mind, and they said they feel sad, they feel anxious, and they also feel like they want to know what is happening, what can we all do in this. The fourth thing is schools aren't teaching about climate change and sustainability in most cases. There was a study that analyzed 100 global national curricula, national school curricula, and out of 100 national school curricula, only 53 only made mention of climate change or environmental sustainability. Mention even of it. And that means that in schools, it's really not taking place to the degree that it needs to take place. And there's another fifth point to this, which is teachers don't feel ready to talk about climate change in their classrooms. There was a study of 58,000 teachers that said 95% of teachers want to teach about climate change. Only 40% of teachers feel ready to teach about climate change. And then there's a sixth point to it, which is there's very strong forces that keep the status quo in place, which is strong lobbies that just don't want children to learn about this. And there's also very limiting mindsets. There's a mindset that the teacher has to know everything before being able to stand up in front of a class and teaching about climate change. And we have to change that. We have to address these sort of root causes of why climate change isn't being taught in school.
Thank you, Lennart. Megan, we've heard a young wizard. I would describe you, if you don't mind, as an alchemist, transforming anxiety into hope. Can you tell us the magic behind it?
Certainly. Is that on there? I want to also thank Francisco so much for muchas gracias por todos que haces. Gracias. I have to also say that I'm very much about normalizing the emotions that come with climate change and how we process the information when we hear about it. And so often we shed tears that are very sad and grief and not the tears that we want to shed. But today I was able to shed hopeful tears thanks to you. So, gracias. One of the things that we know about the climate crisis is that it's very difficult for people to process the information about it. Scientists have been banging their heads against the wall because they work on the information deficit model, in the sense that you know what the problem is, you know what to do about it, but it's that middle section that falls out. And that's why psychology can be really helpful, because it can help people connect to the narratives and to the identity and to the emotion that actually drives that change for the long run. So by helping children through education develop their identity within this as a community, in a school, there's a great opportunity to foster that sense of ability to take action, but in a way that's sustainable for young people and is not going to lead to that burnout, to that anxiety, but it's going to lead to that hope, that motivation, and optimism. So we do that by training teachers to foster containment when they teach education, to help learners become active communicators so that they can influence their systems around them, their parents, their grandparents, their carers. And by doing that, it actually brings the whole community into play. And I think that that's so important. It was wonderful to see you bringing in your group. You know, it starts with a spark, and that spark can set fire, and it's amazing.
Thank you. That's very moving. Maïlys, I guess it's not always easy for the young people around you to deal with their own emotions. And France is not the country where social emotional intelligence has been fostered the most. How do you combine, you know, emotional intelligence and climate intelligence, the ability to not be a victim of what happens, but, you know, an actor and an author of the future?
Yes, that's a big issue, and as you mentioned, it's also something that first we have to deal with as the adults, and then we can try to help the children as well to go through this. And I think one of the main way to manage it is to take action, as you mentioned, and as Francisco is doing, because yeah, that's a great way to feel hope, to be part of something, to try to make the change that you want to see. So I think that's a big thing. And then there is also, it's important to not forget to do other activities. I think you mentioned art maybe earlier when we were talking, and other way to express themselves and to find, to deal with their anxiety and.
Yeah, I'm glad you're talking about art. I was yesterday at UNESCO on art education panel, and most of art education is to know about art of the past. But what about using art as therapy, or at least as cathartic abilities to express sadness or tough emotions, and be again an alchemist, transforming those difficult moments into something that is beautiful? I think, you know, there is some magic about art. I don't know, how do you practice this in your class, or maybe the two of you want to react on this because you might know of other ways of doing this. Maïlys, you want to start?
On how we practice it?
Yeah.
So we try to foster the creativity of the children. So we try to incorporate it in many subjects. And yeah, we always encourage them to express themselves, and we have sometimes special workshops where they can draw or paint or have manual activities. And
their art piece relate to those situations of climate anxiety or something?
It really depends. Sometimes we also try to work specifically on feelings and emotions, but sometimes it can be other subjects. But in any way, it's we try to give them this tool to be able to draw and.
Megan?
I think art is a wonderful vehicle for expressing emotions that sometimes either are difficult for young people to name, or older people for that matter. We tend to run on happy, sad, glad, mad, and that's kind of it. And so actually giving space for children to connect also with empathy, because I think there's a lot of potential for empathy in artwork in this subject. So one thing that we do is we ask the children to draw a picture of the earth and describe, or whether through art or through words around it, how we think the earth feels. And then that often leads to them expressing, actually, I do feel that sadness that this is happening to me. And I do feel this hope because I see the activism that's happening around. And so I think by, you know, there's been some wonderful dance movements that have happened here. I think there's in music, it's really hit the pop culture lexicon as well. And so I think we're seeing it really make those cultural shifts that only art can really do. And I think it's a beautiful way to help express how we feel, but also it's an action in and of itself, which is very nice.
Lennart, given the numbers of teachers in your network, if all of the art produced by the kids in all of those classrooms were put together, we could have the first Planetism museum of, you know, art for the planet. How do you react to this?
Absolutely, we could. I would even probably make the scope of that broader. So I want to connect with something that Maïlys said, which is around the teacher mindset. At Teach for All, we have something called teaching as collective leadership, which in essence mean teachers as co-learners, students as leaders, and community as power. And this links to something that Francisco said, which is climate education is not an activity like tree planting. It's an approach, and it's an approach that is rooted in the local context of the community. And what the most powerful examples of climate education from our network do is a teacher at the beginning of the semester, together with the class, brainstorms on what are the key sustainability challenges of our own community. And then they're co-creating, exactly what you mentioned in the beginning, François. They're co-creating, for example, they're developing soap from used cooking oil that they get from the school canteen, or they develop oyster mushrooms from coffee grounds, or they develop other things that could beautifully be displayed in such a museum.
Wonderful. I would like to go back to Francisco's proposal on hope, or, you know, maybe a question for you, Maïlys, to begin with is, you're going to soon see your kids again. You know, what are you going to tell them about what you heard today?
Yeah, I was actually thinking about that while I was listening to Francisco, and I will definitely talk about Francisco to them, and I'm very curious and excited to see their reactions, and I want to brainstorm with them on what they can do to join Francisco's movement, and to what eco-hope means to them, and yeah, I think it's going to be very interesting.
I'll go back to you, Lennart. How could you mobilize, or would you want to mobilize, you know, the Teach for All amazing network to invite the kids in their classrooms to start thinking about eco-hope and join the movement that Francisco is initiating?
Yeah, so I think we're approaching it in stages. So as I was introducing in the beginning, climate education is barely being addressed in schools. So what we've recently started together with Learning Planet Institute and with Aga Khan Foundation is a movement called Teachers for the Planet. So as a first step, what we're aiming to do is that we're building a community of teachers as well as organizations all around the world that are supporting teachers in getting climate ready. And we have 400 organizations and thousands of teachers within that community. And what we're also doing is that we're bringing out 100 climate education solutions that we see from different schools and different classrooms all over the world, and we make them accessible to inspire, to activate, to empower more teachers to do this work. Then I think the next step is that through all these teachers, we reach so many more students and we can connect students with each other, just like Francisco does, creating a movement of students who are demanding the right to echo hope and who are demanding the right to take agency on these issues.
Amazing. Megan, how would you transform what you already do, which is already amazing, after you've heard Francisco's call?
I think it's really important to. I think it's a good question. I think one thing that it's really important to be conscious of when we're encouraging children to take all these actions, it's also giving them permission to take the breaks that they need for their mental health, because we know that climate action can reduce climate anxiety, but it can also work to the effect of acting as a buffer, and that buffer can lead to burnout. And I've worked with lots of young people that are burning out, and they're the future leaders of tomorrow. We need to equip them with the resilience, and it's our position as psychologists and as we train teachers to help them understand that this will permeate every aspect of their life and all of their decisions, and it's important that they build robust self-care plans, that we foster that sort of ability for them to understand this isn't their fault. This is something that all the emotions that come with this are important and necessary, and we as adults and teachers need to do all that we can to give them the tools that they need.
Do you think that if there was, say, a new human right, the right for echo hope, written by children for the next generations, do you think that that would have an influence on the current level of anxiety that everyone suffers from, especially the young ones?
I think that these emotions, they come and they go and they change, and so there will be times where I'm sure Francisco's felt that anxiety, and that anxiety has led to that action, which has actually become hope. We were talking about how these difficult emotions like grief and anger and anxiety, they're difficult for us to process and hold for a long time. And if we try to take action based on those, we're going to burn out. We're going to feel overwhelmed, and that's where apathy and that those difficult things come into place that stop us from taking action. But if we can look to what's important, what our objects of care are from those signals that we're getting, those eco-anxiety, whether it's about social justice or if it's about natural resources being depleted or biodiversity being threatened. When we can look at actually what matters to us, what's meaningful for us, we connect to different values and different emotions like love, guardianship, stewardship over nature, social justice. All of these, when we start to anchor in those places, that's where we're going to thrive, and that hope and that active hope where we need to stay. And so it's really important, I think, to move from those difficult emotions and anchor on to the ones that are actually going to give us longevity and resilience.
Wonderful. I think we have like 30 seconds each of you to conclude. So I'll start with you, Lennart, and I'll leave you the last word.
Okay, I think the one thing I want to say that we haven't addressed, it's linking to what Francisco said. This is all integrated. We're not talking about climate change as an insular issue. We're talking about something that's deeply integrated, and what we are trying to equip our teachers with is an integrated way of teaching about the issue in language, in biology, in geography, in the sciences, in arts. So how can students feel their own agency across all these different subjects? So it's an integrated world, and it's also an integrated sort of holistic kind of education that we need to get students climate ready.
Megan?
I think actively supporting children find their own path and their own journey in what they're good at, what they enjoy, and helping them to think about how they can make that impact go as far as possible, really nurturing their passions, and that's where they're going to, again, find that thriving place where they take their climate action.
Wonderful. Maïlys?
I would like to conclude by saying that I think that a main barrier is our belief system, and that often we think that it's not possible. And Francisco showed us that it's possible today, and at my school we are trying to show that it's possible each day to be more sustainable. And so we have to change our mindset and believe that we can actually change things.
Amazing. You've been fantastic. You know, after him, that was a very tough challenge, but you did it beautifully, so you've shown that it's possible, even though it looked impossible. You walked the talk. Thank you so much. It was amazing. Thank you. It's so nice to have teachers, adults that care and foster the next generation's culture of change and their will to make a difference.